right, Mr. Chair, we are ready to go.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone. This is the Hanover Owen Sound Task Force meeting, December 14th. I'll call the meeting to order. Is there a declaration of interest, anyone? Seeing none, we'll move on to business arising. Randy, this is a really short turnaround. Do you have anything to report at all?
We don't at this stage. We're still in the process of finalizing the recommendations and opportunities from the discussion from the meeting on Friday, which focused on labor force and economic development. We'll finalize a summary of that discussion and include that in the document for the next meeting along with today's summary.
Okay, thanks for that. Savannah, go ahead.
If I could really quickly, Chair O'Leary, we're just collecting some of those statistics that you had asked for, so we'll have that included in the next one. But I did get the one back that Councillor Milne was asking about from farmers employed versus non-employed, and are they counted? And Gemma did report back that 259 farms have employees, meaning they've got payroll, and 1,675 have no employees and do not have payroll. So all of those farms in Grey County are included in our stats. Thank you.
Well, that's perfect. I'm glad we made Councillor Milne happy right off the bat, because he was grumpy earlier on. We'll move on to...
Man, this is a tough crowd, I'll tell you.
We'll move on to item number 4. And just before I do the introduction, I just want to, just in the spirit of organization, I think we'll let our presenters do their entire presentation this morning. And if you've got questions, or if you just take notes along the way, and then we'll do the questions after the presentation. So item number 4, happy to introduce the Bruce Grey Child and Family Services Executive Director, Phyllis Lovell. Good morning, Phyllis. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with your task force. I have a very small PowerPoint. I don't know, Rob, if you are able to put that up, or if somebody's able to put it up for me.
Actually, it's Heather, and I will share my screen.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So Bruce Grey Child and Family Services is a relatively new organization formed by the amalgamation of Legacy Bruce Children's Aid and Legacy Grey Owen Sound Children's Aid in 2012. So we serve the entire jurisdiction of the counties Bruce and Grey together. So it was very interesting to be asked to think about the work that you're doing and to have the opportunity to talk about the work that we do with vulnerable families. So I'll get you to go to the first slide, or the second slide, Heather. On an annual basis, we get about 1,400 calls from various sources across the 2 regions with concerns expressed for specific children in individual families. And of those referrals, the 2 biggest geographic regions are City of Owen Sound and Hanover. It's probably not a surprise because they're 2 of the most common, and they're 2 areas that tend to have services associated and housing available to vulnerable families. Here at Bruce Grey Child and Family Services, while we serve families for a number of reasons, the top reason, I'm just going to check and make sure people can hear me.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, I'm getting an internet message. So the top reason that we serve families is because we have a parent who has a problem creating risk for children, or partner conflict and partner violence. So if you thought that our organization saw maltreated children, children that have been physically or sexually harmed by a parent, by far the vast majority of referrals are related to a parent who has an addiction issue, a mental health issue, a developmental challenge, or some combination thereof, or parents who are in conflict with each other, where there have been overt acts of violence as well. So the two primary referral sources for us would be the boards of education and police services. And most of the partner violence referrals come from police services. So we investigate those concerns, or we assess families with a view to looking at need. And about 23 to 30% of those families go on to receive longer term supports and services. So the assessment phase is something that normally takes a month or two. And then if you're a family that needs ongoing supports, typically you would be a service user for 18 to 24 months. I'll get you to move the slide, Heather. So at any given time, our organization is seeing about 420, 430 families. They're all in various stages of service, so families open and close. But typically there are about 400 plus families who require specific supports and interventions in order to successfully parent their kids. So next slide. I think many people have a misconception that families who are involved with us are court mandated to do so, and that would not be true. So only about 25% of families that we work with are identified to the court and are subject to a court order. So that leaves 75% of families who are voluntarily involved with us. And of all of the children served, about 98% of kids are served living at home with their families. So they're not children who have an intervention that involves an out-of-home placement. They continue to live with their parents, and we're able to effectively partner with families to see to their safety and their well-being within their family unit. So I've already referenced the low incidence of serious physical and sexual maltreatment, and the bulk of our work is with families who have chronic long-term challenges that they deal with every single day, that they have contingency plans or safety plans in place to deal with. And when children need an out-of-home placement, increasingly we're looking to extended family or a family's kin network to provide a safe alternative. So traditionally, we had a large number of foster parents who are families that are strangers to children that need intervention, who are able to care, but increasingly, rather than place a child with a stranger family, foster family, we're able to place a child with a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a family friend who's able to offer safe alternative care. And we also are very committed to providing what's called customary care for Indigenous children. So we serve 2 First Nations in our jurisdiction, and customary care is an agreement with the leaders of an Indigenous community for that community to become the caregiver for children that need intervention. And then members of the community care for these children. They don't come into our care, but we support the families who provide this care financially and through the assessment of safety for the children. So next slide. So why the large number of parents who fall into that category of caregiver with a problem? And I would say that we serve parents, we serve families who've often experienced childhood trauma themselves. So they were raised in families where they did not experience safe care. And that experience in early childhood results in a lifetime challenge around navigating difficult emotional situations and being able to be personally resourceful and resilient when experiencing stress. Many of these families live in poverty or have precarious employment, so they are not people with high incomes, with a set of services and benefits through their employer that let them access personal private counseling, but people who have jobs that are minimum wage, jobs without benefits. So there's no real safety net around their employment. And we've certainly seen the impact of pandemic on some of these families, in that this precarious employment has just simply disappeared in the context of the lockdowns that have been experienced across the community. So if you have unstable income or low income, you almost inevitably face housing insecurity. You struggle to afford housing. You certainly don't own your own housing. And as communities evolve and grow, so if you look at people in the Dundalk community, as that community has become a bedroom community for the city, you see increasing challenges around finding appropriate housing that is affordable, because your community is changing, housing prices are going up, and people who struggle with income security get kind of pushed to the margins there. There are also big transportation challenges, and you will all know that the city of Owen Sound is the only community in our jurisdiction that has a public transit system, and the rest of our communities struggle in that respect. So often families make choices about where they live based on the walkability of the community and their access to services through using their feet to get around. I think one of the reasons why our organization is as busy as it is because we are still in-home service delivery focused. So our staff, rather than seeing people in an office setting, go to people's homes, meet with people in their setting. They do that because that's an important part of assessing how a family is doing, but it also makes our service one of the most accessible in the community. And as more and more services withdraw into office settings, it becomes more and more difficult for some families who struggle with income, who struggle with housing insecurity, who struggle with transportation challenges, get more and more isolated in terms of accessing help when they need it. So the last point that I would make is that mental health of adults is a primary concern that we see in the work that we do with families. A mental health problem is not a problem that goes away in your lifetime, just like diabetes is something that you might be diagnosed with and that might be a health challenge for the balance of your life. Many of the people that we partner with, that we work with, have mental health concerns that don't disappear, they don't go away. They're managed on a day-to-day basis, sometimes more or less successfully, depending on how much stress is in their life. And we have particularly seen the impact, the social impact of pandemic on people's experience of mental healthiness since March of last year. And we don't expect that impact is going to go away anytime soon. I think we're all excited about the prospect of a vaccine, but it will be many months before life will begin to return to some normalcy. And it may be many years before some people who've been particularly affected by the pandemic from a mental health perspective feel more balanced and more settled and healthier as a result of the impact of the social isolation that's occurred through the pandemic. Thank you. So there are some big challenges for our organization. The first and foremost is the lack of adult mental health and addiction recovery services for parents. And that's a matter of health policy. That is a provincial challenge, but I do want to take note of it. Adult mental health services tend to be geared towards the people who are most challenged by mental health services and are not kind of universally available or accessible or readily accessible to parents who are dealing with childhood trauma, dealing with addictions challenges. We particularly also take note of the lack of recovery services for women in the community. Women are often primary parents in the lives of their children. There is residential support for men in our community, but there is no such support for women. And there certainly isn't a support that would welcome a woman to come with her children and offer residential support that would include care for dependent or young children at the same time. Likewise, I dare say that you probably heard from some of my community partners the increasing concern about the mental health of children and youth, the impact of the long school break, the worry that comes with the pandemic, the kind of change and shift to a new normal that includes masks and social distancing for children. There's lots of worry about the long-term impact for all of the children in our community, but particularly children living in vulnerable families. And a worry that the capacity of a place like Keystone will just not be there to address all of the needs. So we're very happy to see increasing supports in school settings. Schools tend to be universal experience for young people, for children. And so the more opportunity that's there for kids, probably the better for our community in the long term. We also worry about the very few in-home services and the fact that we're a very large geographic area. We're 8,000 square kilometers. We have lots of small towns and villages. And it's unlikely that we will see sufficient population density to see services anchored in those small towns and villages. And we worry about how people who live in those small towns and villages get access to helping services. Does that tend to congregate families that are struggling in places like Hanover and the city of Owen Sound? Do you then have the weight of vulnerable families more disproportionately experienced by Hanover and Owen Sound? And one of the other very big protective factors for kids is access to high quality center-based daycare. And we worry about the availability of center-based daycare placements for parents, and not just for parents who work, but parents whose children really need the additional care and support and stimulation that comes with the opportunity to be in a center-based daycare resource. It is really a factor that increases the resilience of children, helps them with their growth and development, and gets them school ready. And that is often a very big support in the life of a family where you have a parent who's struggling with depression, struggling with addiction, just struggling to be present to kind of turn their mind from the worries that they have and the problems that they have to the care of their children. It really increases the odds that you will have healthy, resilient children coming out of families that experience those difficulties and those struggles. And the last, so there are opportunities for us particularly during this time. And I know that your work is not focused on pandemic, but it's hard to talk to you about the work of Bruce Grey Child and Family Services without using that context. We are looking as an organization in our work with families and our work with the networks who surround families to really up the amount of contact that we have with people's social supports, and to see them as to see the social supports as potential supports for specific children that improve their resilience and their ability to grow and develop in a normal, healthy way. So in that collection of people, I would include faith communities, sports coaches, community connections that exist in all of the little towns and villages across our region that are there that help kids really be balanced and healthy and connected with the community. And we typically would not, we work very closely with a number of service partners, but we wouldn't probably have had that many connections with faith communities, for example. And we know that that's something that we need to grow and develop in the coming months and years, so that we do the very best we can to see kids successfully and tenaciously connected to communities. We would take note of unprecedented cooperation among charities since the start of the pandemic, and we hope that that's something that will survive the pandemic. We see people flexing their mandates and partnering in ways that have not happened before. So we see Habitat for Humanity helping food banks and services like OShare get food out to people who are in precarious housing, and that is new as of March, and that it just amplifies the capacity of the helping organizations to get their critical work done and to really reach the most vulnerable in our community. We also think that that we need to understand our population better, and I think there's incredible opportunity for a stronger municipal connection that looks at population data and understands it not from the perspective of attracting business, which I think municipalities have always done. You've always had an economic development focus, and you do put out information for prospective businesses and industry, but a much stronger focus on social determinants, on understanding who lives in our communities and how they're faring. And we would welcome that partnership so that we can leverage the kind of data that a municipality connects and is capable of analyzing and utilize it for the provision of social supports. We hope that our community is becoming more diverse. We want that diversity. We want to be responsive to the diverse needs of the population that we serve. But it's really important to stay ahead of the knowledge that you can use to be a nimble organization and a responsive organization by looking at population data. So that's something that I hope that that your committee will think about. I suspect you probably already are. And I wonder if there are opportunities for you to make that data more accessible to community partners and to community services, so that we do the very best job that we can with respect to the people that we serve. And I think that's it for me. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Thanks, Phyllis. That was very informative. I see Deputy Warden McQueen has joined us. Any questions for Phyllis? Kim, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies. Phyllis, thanks. That was a great presentation. We have been having discussions internally here as staff about the need for Gray and Gray Bruce specific data and what we can do to try and facilitate that. And it's great to hear that you would be interested in sharing that information with us. I guess I look to you, and when it comes to that forward planning piece and being able to provide information back to us about when we're doing community development plans or long-term planning from that respect, would your organization be able to have, provide input to us about, I guess, key factors that we need to be considering when we're growing and developing communities?
Yes, we absolutely could. So we have access to a provincial database, but we can disaggregate data and compile data based on our jurisdiction, based on postal code, and we can be very descriptive about
precise, maybe, yeah.
and how we serve and the reasons for the service. We have data based on the children served. So that is something that we absolutely have to contribute to.
Great.
A regional approach to data, and think that there's lots of value in putting data together from multiple sources so that we all share a better analysis of the population that
And
we
maybe a more complete picture.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
More questions? Warden Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phyllis, great presentation. Thank you. I'm of late becoming more and more interested in that term childhood trauma. And you had it on your slide, I think it's slide number 3, where you talked about challenges for parents is childhood trauma. And we're hearing at the Board of Health that a majority of adults who are challenged with drug or alcohol dependency, a good majority of those people, they know, suffered some kind of childhood trauma. So what, if anything, should we be doing to address childhood trauma, or perhaps more specifically, fewer children experiencing childhood trauma?
So that's a great question, and I think researchers around the world have been really focused on that question, because we understand that an unsafe childhood has an impact that lasts a lifetime. One of the best ways for me to conceptualize this is the experience of having somebody ask you not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you, so that the context for understanding adult challenges is that they have their roots in an unsafe childhood, which takes a lot of stigma away from somebody who experiences an addiction problem and feels like a failure. So a safe childhood is the most important path forward. Hence my reference to center-based daycares, because a safe school setting, a safe daycare setting is one of the best ways of creating resilience in childhood. A place where a child feels affirmed, safe, well cared for, is encouraged, can really go a long way to helping a child whose family is perhaps not doing its very best still feel valuable, cared for, encouraged, and stimulated to be the very best that they can be. I also think that we need to see more services in the community that help the adults who are currently experiencing the impact of an unsafe childhood gain some perspective and equip themselves with a lifetime of supports that will help them do the very best that they can. And for people caught in the cycle of addiction, that really, we really do need solid treatment supports that help individuals develop a recovery plan that they can work and that their families can help them with. And there just simply isn't enough services in the community to address all the need that is there. We see increasing number of opioid deaths, and our organization works with families who have experienced recent deaths because of the opioid crisis. We see the most negative consequences of the experience of childhood trauma. And these are all people, every single person that's died in the past 2 or 3 months from an opioid death are all people who could be supported to be in recovery. They're not people who are hopelessly locked in addiction. They've experienced drug use in a way that was unsafe, that resulted in the most negative consequence possible, but could have had a different outcome had there been more availability of treatment options.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Sure.
There was a graph that you showed on slide number 3 which represented high, low, and average. High, low, and average what?
Number of families that are open to our organization for ongoing services. So this is the typical number of families that need support and intervention in order to provide safe care to their children. So you can see the number over since 2016 is relatively stable number. We typically average about 430 families at any given moment in time that need our support in order to provide safe care to their children.
And my last question, Mr. Chair, if I might, I'm going to, I guess, slide number 5, you talked about concurrent challenges for parents. And if you could control the purse strings of a municipality with limited dollars, where would you be directing us to put our resources?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think transportation is critically important. Transportation helps you get to work, helps you get around the community and address the needs that you and your family have. But housing, supportive housing is also right up there in my top 10 as well. I think the opportunity to have a predictable expenditure on housing for many families is really critical to stability within their families. I don't think we see homelessness like we do downtown Toronto with people sleeping on the streets, but we see families that have very precarious housing, that are either relocating regularly or couch surfing with other family members, and that has a very negative effect on employment, and it has a very negative effect on a child's ability to get to school or their school success, because their school is changing regularly because of the housing instability. So the more municipalities can create housing opportunities, the better for the families that we serve.
Thank you.
Madam CAO, did you have something you wanted to add there? I thought you had your hand up.
Just another quick question, if I may. Phyllis, is it your sense that that although you say the numbers are stable, would you see you've seen a shift in acuity of the people that you serve, or a change in their needs in the last few years?
Certainly, post-pandemic, we see the impact of the stress of the pandemic on people's mental health, and we see adults increasingly acknowledging that they are near incapacitated by their mental health condition, their depression or their anxiety. And we certainly worry a great deal about escalating addictive behavior and the subsequent use of drugs that are potentially fatal.
Right.
And I'm sure you're well aware of that. Public health has been has done an incredible job of getting information out to all of the helping organizations and hopefully to the community at large. We work in close partnership with public health, with the Drug Strategy Committee, which is a municipal creation. Those are all really important places to talk about these challenges, and that that caregiver with a problem challenge is one that that is the bulk of our work here at Bruce Gray Child and Family Services. And I haven't talked about the use of alcohol as a drug of choice, but that is also, regionally, sometimes the preferred drug of choice for people can have a terribly negative impact on family functioning as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Milne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you as well from me, fellas, for the presentation. It was very good. My question revolves around the graph that the warden referenced just a minute ago there, showing the number of families that you typically serve. Is that throughout Bruce and Gray?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, because your services are primarily focused in Hanover and Owen Sound because of just geography, like you were saying earlier, how many families do you think we're missing? Like, are there, I'm sure there are other families out there that would like to take advantage of your services or could, but just can't because of the various challenges that were outlined in another slide. How many do you think we're missing? Or you're missing, rather?
Yeah, that's such a difficult question to answer. I think the population that we worry about the most, that may be underrepresented in our numbers, is the population of children 0 to age 4. So they're preschool, they're invisible at home. They're not the children that can dial 911 if a parent's unconscious on the floor. And we see, when we look at who comes into care or needs a court intervention or an admission intervention, the population that is most at risk is that 0 to 4 population. And almost always the challenge is the presence of an addiction problem and a very young child who has no physical or cognitive ability to take protective action. So I fear that they're underrepresented in our number, and that they are the unseen victims of poor care or maltreatment because they are not there in the general population being seen, and the need is not taken note of by somebody who can pick up the phone and call us and say, you ought to have a look at how this family's doing because we're concerned that things are not good for the children.
Right, right. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you indeed for the work you do there. It's so valuable. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Warden McQueen, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my question is focused around nutrition. And I know quite a few years back now, a lot of the schools offer the breakfast program for children. And I just wondered if, I know if we're not getting proper nutrition or even having food to be able to eat, it affects a lot of other parts of our middle state and everything. I don't know if you have any comments with regards to that.
The school-based nutrition programs are a lifeline to the families that we serve. And one of the things we worried about the most in March was what's happening to the kids who normally had breakfast at school, and schools are amazing places and they tend to be able to figure things out for kids. Often those kids didn't just get breakfast at school, but they ate their lunch there too, and it came out of the breakfast food. We had staff who, during the lockdown part of the pandemic, were not essential. They were not delivering an essential service. So we had staff go to other community partners, including the United Way, to get that breakfast program food out to families. And because my staff travel across the entire region, we were very able to be the deliverable, the people who delivered that food to the various towns and villages across the region. They are lifeline. They need to be in place. And it was a sobering experience to have school shut down and realize that created a big gap for kids. So I can't tell you how much we value that service and how much of a lifeline schools are in the lives of kids. I'm sure that you know that as caring adults, as municipal leaders. They are really one of the places where a kid whose family is struggling often gets the adult attention and the practical things like food to kind of make do.
Yeah, and just following up with that, I know a lot of volunteers, a lot of parents, and that helps support that, and that's very good for our community and that part. And I know we all, if we have an empty stomach, we can't focus the same as if we have food in our stomach. Is there a possibility though for good food and we've talked a bit about this at our local municipality about the ability to grow your own food and community gardens and that type of thing. You have any ideas to share on that? Because I know we're talking about creating that opportunity through our budget process here. And, so, I mean, you can only live so long on craft dinner. So the ability to grow food, especially in the summer months, to have that, and I know they're even doing it in the north, looking at ways of how you can grow your own food with certain varieties and certain changes to our type of food to grow. You can grow in certain climates. So I just wondered if you have any comments around the community garden aspect.
Well, just a personal vote in favor of, as a gardener myself, I think that there's something, incredibly wonderful and healthy about growing your own food and having the experience of being successful at, seeing tomatoes ripen. I think the kind of leadership from municipalities around encouraging community gardens, the kind of involvement from places like faith communities in food security, are really incredible models and very achievable projects, I think. So that opportunity will absolutely enhance the lives of the people we serve.
So just to follow up with that, Mr. Chair, then, so maybe from a municipal side, and I know, again, we're looking at this, are there lands within our municipality that could be available for that type of use? And so we're looking at that ourselves. So that's just something maybe that could enhance into the county system or however. So thank you for that.
Okay, and I'll just note that Barb Fady messaged to everyone there. United Way worked with our social services staff to distribute gift cards from the Ontario Student Nutrition Program when the kids were not in school. So thanks for that, Barb. Any other questions? I have a couple for you, Phyllis, if that's okay. You talked about the children that have been placed with aunts and uncles to give them like a familiar surrounding. But when you were talking about the customary care for Indigenous children, it wasn't, you didn't say that. Can you just go over that again? Why is it different with our Indigenous community?
So without a lengthy history lesson, I think it's fair to say that Indigenous communities have experienced child welfare services as intrusive and oppressive. We've seen a disproportionate number of Indigenous children admitted to care. Often we can't resource them in an Indigenous home, and so they're in stranger care, but they're also in care of a family that isn't a cultural match for them. And customary care is really different because it's a form of care that places an Indigenous child in the care of their community, not a child welfare organization. So these kids don't come into stranger care, don't come into our foster care system. We look for a family in their own community that can provide safe care. We support the nation, the leaders of the nation, the administration of the nation, with the same financial support that would go to the care of a foster child, but the nation shares that care stipend with the caregiving family. So these are not kids in our care. They don't factor into our care count. They are in the care of their nation, and they're culturally matched, and often with their kin, with their aunties or uncles or extended family within the nation. So it's a very different approach to care for Indigenous children that really recognizes the historical harm that happened through policy, through adoption of Indigenous children by non-Indigenous families, etc.
Well, that was rather sad, but good for us all to get a better understanding of what goes on there. You just touched on Keystone for a second or two. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what Keystone does? And I don't know what the vacancy is like there either. If you could just talk about that.
So Keystone is our children's mental health community partner. We work in close association with that organization. Their job is to see to the mental health needs of children age 0 to 18. They do that largely through community-based counseling services and supports. And they do have a residence that they use for youth who there's a serious concern about self-harm with. So they do have the opportunity to do assessment and support for kids at serious risk of self-harm. So we refer families. Sometimes we're both supporting the same family. They're providing a counseling service. Our focus is on the safety and well-being of the children and the functioning of the family. And we coordinate our efforts so that the family experiences that shared partnership between the two of us as supportive rather than confusing or people giving kind of different advice and direction. We also have the same partnership with Canadian Mental Health too. So the adult service providers are really important aspects in the lives of some of the families that we serve. Their focus is on people who are more seriously ill with mental health challenges. And I think we see a lot of families, a lot of adults, a lot of parents whose depression or anxiety is serious and it's an interference in their life, but they're not disabled by it. So they may not be as seriously ill as the typical kind of referral criteria to Canadian Mental Health would have someone become a service user.
Good, thank you. Any other questions for Phyllis? Deputy Warden McQueen.
So just I want to share a little bit of a story that I have. Well, it's not really a story. My wife and I lost our niece this past summer from a situation of a person who was addicted to drugs for quite a few years, and she had been in Ottawa in a rehab center and she was getting the help and she was getting much better. But the problem that sort of was peer pressure from some of her friends that pulled her away, and she was doing so well. And it's just, I don't know how you can control that, especially with social media and everything today and that type of thing. But it's sort of a situation that, I hear about, your deaths here in Grey Bruce and stuff like that. I don't know if there's a way. You don't want to put them in an institution and throw away the key to keep them away from it, take away their social, because the cell phones and our smartphones today are your lifeline for a lot of everything, especially the youth of today. And so it's just unfortunate that the situation happened, but it's happening to a lot. And I don't know what the remedy for it is, and how do you, it's just that addiction just gets so embedded in them. It's just, how do you break that? And it's just, and my niece also got involved with more in touch with, from a religious side, and got in touch, and that really helped her as well. And it just happened to be just one bad weekend, broke away, and then it was tragic. So I know and she was a very young adult, and it just, but she was struggling with it for years. And I don't know, how do you stop it on the other end? And maybe that's from an influence from different factors. I know it's hard for young people growing up. There's so much socialness, and we all went to, school, and especially when you get to high school, there's you sort of fall into those groups where you sort of, it's peer pressure and all that kind of stuff. And I certainly don't have the answer, but I don't know what the solution is either. And it's just such a situation, society wise. How do we, is there any solution? Like, because we keep having these deaths, and I don't know, can we as, I don't know, it's, I don't know if there's retreats, or just us as a society, as adults, showing more compassion, or just creating that time, or just opening up that opportunity to have fun without any substance abuse, or not substance abuse, but substance of influence. It's once it just, and maybe it spears back to the part of growing up from the parent side. I there's probably multiple aspects, and I just raise that in the sense of my own personal experience, and it just, you just shake your head. I know growing up, maybe Councillor Millen could relate to, somewhat growing up in the country, you're maybe not exposed to those elements maybe as much as the urban centers, but it does with social media today. It's just, all the social things are all connected. Everybody's so connected today. It's even more, anyway, I'll maybe stop at that. I just wanted to share, and just, going forward, how can we make a difference? I guess that's the big question, right?
Oh, well, thank you for sharing your story. I think all of us have people in our lives who struggle with addiction. I think that is a very common family experience, and I'm sorry that your family experienced such a tragedy. We understand addiction as you are in recovery, but your struggle is lifelong. It doesn't disappear, and people who are in recovery work hard every single day to stay in recovery. And I know, public health's best advice for people who've been in recovery is for people to be really mindful that relapse happens, and to be extremely cautious with a relapse, with a decision to use again, around quantity and the safety of that experience, because sadly your niece is probably more vulnerable than people who are using every single day, because that sensitivity to the drug is heightened. That's the challenge in 2020. Gray and Bruce, before, our drug of choice was alcohol. It takes several decades to die of alcoholism. I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's a drug that has a long-term impact that is ultimately health challenging, but the drug of choice that we see most often in the families that we serve are things like opioid or crystal meth. And the experience of health challenges related to drug use like that is much more immediate and much, much more risky. And it's very easy to have a situation where you don't intend to overuse, but that is in fact your experience. And so making families hyper aware of the risks and encouraging and supportive of recovery, but expecting relapse and ready to help somebody even when they're relapsing. And that's, that's new learning at our organization, because before we were abstinence promoters. If you were a drug user, you had to stop, you had to stay stopped in order to care for your children. And our practice now would be to say to a family, this is a serious problem. It's very risky to care for an infant or a toddler when you're using, so other people have to step in and help. So grandparents, aunties, uncles have to be there ready to assist. But we also need you to assist the drug using person, to remind them about use post recovery, to see to their well-being, to encourage them not to use alone, to do those practical things that before felt like we were enabling the drug use, as opposed to understanding that our job was to help the person who was using stay safe even when they were in a period of relapse, because they could enter recovery again, and they were still somebody's daughter, they were still somebody's mom, they're still somebody's loved person. And our focus has to be more on their well-being, no matter whether they're using or not using. And that's really tough. And staying in recovery, staying continuously in recovery, we know from the research is not most people's experience. Yet long-term recovery is very possible if people feel supported and understood. And part of that is attending to the childhood trauma that might make somebody particularly vulnerable to drug or alcohol use and misuse over the long term.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Phyllis, thank you very much for your presentation. Very educational, and most of all, thank you for what you do. And thanks for sharing.
Thanks very much. I'll share your appreciation with my staff group. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thanks, Paul, for sharing that story. That's a tough one as well. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, Council on Aging actively engaging with seniors, and Vice Chair and very familiar face, former City Councilor Jan Chamberlain. Good morning, Jan. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. And boy, did I ever appreciate that conversation. And I'm going to start probably more from grassroots than anything. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I think I thought I did. Okay. We did present a presentation, and I think most of you have heard the Council on Aging presentation at your municipalities, because we have been actively for 5 years working with municipalities to make them aware of our goals to have a very age-friendly community in each of our municipalities. And I can spend a lot of time on kind of how we started back at a senior summit in 2014 out of the Active Lifestyle Center in Owen Sound under Jerry Trainor's leadership, because she had joined with the Ontario Association of Older Adults, and they were wanting all of our centers to become age-friendly. So we decided to come at it by being a Council on Aging, and with that, we then wanted to have representatives on our council from each municipality. So the idea was that each municipality would have a seniors advisory committee, and a person from their committees would come to our council, and we meet once a month, and we discuss the issues that seniors are having in their communities. So when I said about grassroots there, I just wanted you to know I've been also attending the Healthy Communities Network table for over 10 years, and I'm on the Owen Sound Nonprofit Housing Board. And those things, along with a bit of a background in children's aid with Phyllis, I'm pretty aware of the community in Gray and Bruce from what's going on. And with the seniors, through this COVID, I've been asked several times what's going on. And, you know, we almost came to a standstill because the seniors were very scared. And most of them have belonged to some sort of seniors club, a church group, or they seem to go together when they're older because they want to, well, it's a lot of it's sitting, but they are playing cards together. All of those things have been stopping. And to a degree, we've been trying to get people to go on Zoom like we're doing this morning and work with that. But the biggest thing I'm proud of what's been happening in our groups is some of the senior advisory committees, especially the one in Blue Mountains and the one in North Bruce Peninsula, they both have started these things called Senior Centers Without Walls, which is basically a phone-based program. And we've been reaching out to our isolated seniors in each of our communities just from word of mouth of each other. Some know someone else that they haven't seen someone, or there's something's happened, but it's almost all been phone-based. And I've been just recently thinking about how best to reach all the seniors. A lot of them are okay, but a lot of them have all the issues we just discussed in the last presentation with grandchildren and opioid. They have there's a lot of big issues, and people just need to help each other. What I'm experiencing myself as an older person is we all still want to feel like we belong in our communities and that we're still needed. And so we aren't, as a Council on Aging, we aren't really doing programming, but we are trying to get groups to organize to let people know what people are doing. There is a lot of things happening in our community. And I think there's a presentation that I think all of you have on paper, but I wouldn't mind answering some questions, because I think I would be best answering some of your questions from my perspective, what's going on with the seniors. And we just recently had a Council on Aging call-in chat meeting. Tanya Shute and Wally Holiday both are the current chairs. I'm the vice chair. And that's mainly because of, well, it's lots of reasons. But in the meantime, our meeting last Friday was very aware, we were very aware from the different reportings from the different senior advisory group that a lot of them are very concerned about their seniors right now. And I was telling some people that it turns out that one of their best friends is the radio. They're not, a lot of them aren't, like they aren't watching TV as much as they were before because they can't stand all the stuff that's going on CNN anymore. And they are listening to the radio and they want good news stories and they want to know about things. So I think that we need to push how we can use our radio and our telephone systems for our rural seniors is better. And I think I could answer, we could work on that together as a group with the task force. So I am very grassroots, as I said, so let me answer some questions.
Jan, first of all, right off the hop, I just want to ask, what about fear when you're talking to seniors? Is that one of the biggest hurdles to get over? I mean, it's my experience anyways, the older people I talk to, they're just straight up scared, maybe more scared than they need to be. And I think that seems to be getting in the way.
And I'll say the same. Sometimes they're not using that word, but that is what it is, because everything is shut down. And some of them are now sort of sneaking to play cards with what they consider their own little bubble of 3 or 4 people, because they just can't, they're missing their card games. It's bridge, it's euchre, and they're going to people's homes now, and they know they're not supposed to do it, so they feel like they're being rebels. But they just need contact. And, you know, the way that Phyllis was talking about the kids when they were out of the school, so many of them were trying to see their grandchildren, and some of them, you know, the United Way did organize for people to be able to get iPads through the library, and we were encouraging people to do that so they could at least be on FaceTime and see their grandchildren. So it is fear, but it's coming out in losses. Like what they're expressing to me is what they can't do. And I think so, but that is fear, because that's why they can't do it. So if that helps you a little bit, Brian, that is the big thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I don't know, I don't see any hands yet, but I did have one more question. Has there been any, you know, when my mother was at Lee Manor, I used to, well, had a lot to do with my love of old-fashioned, old country music, but they'd have somebody come in and with the guitar and play the old-time music. Those are some of the things that you could do on Zoom. Is that happening with the seniors?
Yeah, that's what's happening with the Senior Centers Without Walls. And they have agendas, a WhatsApp, a calendar, and you call in by phone and you listen. So you're not actually seeing the person, but you're hearing them. And yes, they're doing great presentations with the Alzheimer's societies. Sandra Hong's been doing several Senior Center Without Walls presentations, and music. So they're doing music trivia. Like they'll start a song and they'll say, "Who knows this song?" And the next thing you know, they're all singing on their phones. So that's becoming really an important thing, and we'd like to continue that. But by getting more information, it's the communication of that happening, because we need lots of that happening in the next little while. So we want to push that through the radio programs and let people know. You know, if you just watch what happens when Bill Murdoch's on, we've got people, like that is their lifeline to communication. And we need a whole bunch of different lines. This is what we need. If you don't mind me telling you that, that's what we need.
Okay, so if Murdoch is our lifeline, we are truly in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
But I have to tell you that people like Pat, and you know the ones. That's where we send them. Sorry.
Go ahead, Deputy Warden McQueen.
Well, I will say, I think one thing thank you, Mr. Chair, with Bill Murdoch, he does report on a lot of the small local events that used to be happening. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why people would tune in, because he would talk about that old music. I couldn't always relate to it because I didn't know that stuff, but a lot of people would, right? But I want to say that I'm sure Mr. Chair and others around the table, when we retire, I think that's part of one of the reasons why we retire, to have more time to spend with people. We're not working. And so I can see that social part is so important. I mean, just look, you just mentioned about music. Well, Charlie Pride, my parents, I think I was a little kid when I went to see him in Rock Hill Park a long time ago. And, you know, Charlie, and supposedly he passed because of COVID-19. So, I mean, that doesn't help, you know, and all that, the anxiety that brings. So it's great that if there are better ways, and maybe there's a note that needs to go off to our local radio stations to say, look, we need some more local content, you know, maybe yourself, Mr. O'Leary, you need to have a half-hour show in Owen Sound there and talk about all the things, or, you know, I mean, people can relate. It's like the old newspapers. People like the old columns, that the little wee towns that had little news stories, because people just love that stuff locally. They just like to know what's going on. It's part of that. It's part of that Grey County fabric, that fiber. You know what I mean? It's our part that pulls us together, and so maybe that's something that we can work on or encourage others to try to do. And I can see it's a lifeline for sure, especially in this time. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do see Councillor Desai's hand up.
Oh, Councillor Desai, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions for Jan here. One of the things that we hear a lot is that we will never really know the true toll of the pandemic, because we just don't have a way to measure how it affects mental health, and it's happening to people of every age. I would imagine it's more pronounced for seniors because due to mobility issues and other issues, they had limited social interactions to start with, and the pandemic has really for those who had little social interaction, they're now left with no social interaction. So in your conversations with seniors, has that come to light? And you know, how I guess, well, they're dealing with it by being rebels, as you've said, but how prominent is that issue amongst seniors, the issue of mental health, because they don't have social interaction?
Very thankful. And another thing, they won't use that word very much. They don't like using mental health. They like using that they're stressed. I've been hearing that more and more, and that they can't stand it. You know, they'll say, can't stand this. And they're angry, but that's the outward act, what it sounds like. But of course, anger is the second feeling. What's really in front of that is the fear. And they are not going, and Christmas has been a tricky one. It is hard to measure this, but I do think there are a lot of really good stories, and people are kind. There are a lot of kindness is happening, and we could stress some of that. The churches who have put their online programs and who are mailing out their services to people, I'm hearing a lot of really nice things. I've started walking at the Bay Shore again, just because the way that got restarted by a senior who really felt that they needed to walk, and even with the beds there. And you know, Dr. Era has agreed that most seniors need to be out and being active. So that's where I hear it. I hope I'm answering your question okay, but how to really measure it, I don't know. I see I'm grassroots, so it would have to be under all these people that are keeping track of all their data, their stats, and your committee will likely be doing that.
Thank you for that. And so that does answer my question. It is coming up in conversations with seniors, and I do appreciate that. The other idea that you've mentioned that I really liked is around good news. You know, they want to hear good news, and I think that's true for almost any age group. Just to give everyone an idea of how big of a nerd I've been for as long as I've been a nerd, in high school, I had this idea that we could get kids more involved in current affairs if we had an hour of just good news. My idea at the time was also SpongeBob and Patrick Star would read the news to them instead of, you know, old farts. But I think every generation wants that positive news. They want to know that things are okay in the world. You know, there's definitely bad things that are happening. So my question is, have you reached out to the radio stations to do that, to do an hour a day where there's only good news? No negative news, nothing, just good news.
Not yet, but we're going to do that. In Friday's meeting, this is where this really came up as a strategy for us to make sure that we do. I do call into Open Line and congratulate them quite often on what a nice job they're doing of keeping the community well informed and being kind with to people when they call in. And they've had some crisis calls right to the Open Line. And I do know about the mental health. Like, we're trying to let people know that you can walk in at the hospital and that you will get looked after. There's a lot of new services that people need to know about. So I think just even for us to reach out and get some of these things on the radio more, it's the whole, how we get the communication out about all of this. And every one of us around of our at our municipalities, at our meetings, we can do it. And maybe just get a strategy together through this task force is the best way to do that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen. And you know, if there's any way I can help with that good news hour, I am more than happy to help with that. Thank you.
It's really good.
Kim, did you want to jump in there?
Yes, if I may. Jan, are you okay if I tell the committee about the conversation we've been having? Yeah. So there's currently a grant open right now for assistance to seniors. The deadline to apply is fast approaching, but I reached out both to Bruce County, but also to Jan and her group to try and get a sense of some programming or extension of current programming that might be useful. I saw the Seniors Without Walls and thought that was a really interesting initiative. And then Jan talked about the radio programming part of things. In talking to Rob Hatton, we wondered about reaching out to Ross Kentner, who probably still has a pretty good connection to Bayshore. And if the Bayshore network is really one that has still a really broad reach that most people can, no matter where they lived in the county, would be able to tune into that. So we are looking into it to see if there's some more things that we can. The grant amount is $60,000, but you know, we may be able to do something with that.
Sure. I am most pleased about that conversation we've been having, Kim. And Ross's voice is so wonderful and so well known. He's told stories about the area for so long. It'd be nice if he could be part of the voice of telling some of these things. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, what's the name of that grant, Kim?
I will text it to everyone. I'm just going to find the paper on my desk.
Something to do with community inclusiveness or something like that.
That's right.
Inclusive Communities Grant, I think it's called.
Yeah, it's the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility, and it's the Inclusive Community Grant.
Mm-hmm.
So Jan, here's a dangerous question. There's 5 of us here. If you wanted to say, if you 5 guys were doing your job, you would do this and this and this for the seniors, what would that be? Is there anything in particular that you'd like to see council step up and do?
Well, a lot of seniors still feel about ageism. They don't think they count anymore and that nobody listens to them. So I guess if there's a way to really listen, you know, not just say you're listening to people. And I would like to have at each of these senior advisory committees that we have set up now in our municipalities, we've had fairly good connection to our municipalities and been doing presentations. Owen Sound is mostly doing ours through the Active Lifestyle Center, Brian, as you know about that. And so I guess just to listen and hear. When I first got involved with all of this, I did think that there was, I didn't listen to seniors myself, to be quite honest, when I got involved, because it seemed like it was broken records about what they thought they still needed. But I have totally changed my mind. A lot of seniors have given back so much to the community, and behind every question there's more to it. Just like the work that Phyllis is doing, what's presented is usually not what's really the problem underneath it all. There's a lot more stuff going on. So yeah, listening and trying to get them involved on the committees is still, it's hard because they feel they've retired and they don't need to go back on committees. But that's, nowadays we all need to get past this. So we do need people out there involved, and our role models. We need to just keep telling the story of our role models. There's a lot of good role models out there. Did I give you 3 things to do? To listen, to be a role model yourself, Brian, and to make sure that seniors get included in everything you're doing. That's what our goal of Council on Aging is to make sure that they do a bit of advocacy, that we are making all of our areas age friendly, and embed that into your strategic planning.
Right. I think what happens is there's too many politicians, and I'm certainly guilty of this myself. You look at the money side. What are you doing for the seniors? Yeah. And we do a lot, you know, whether it's we do a lot. You're building, the Bay Shore Community Center. You have access to, and politicians look and say, we're doing so much for them, but maybe the conversation needs to be, what can we do that, forget about the money. Let's just talk about the little things in life that we need to step up and do. But
anyway. It is part. Yeah, it's making our whole community age friendly, and so that all ages count. And then that is how people stay healthy, is if they feel that they still belong in a community and that they're not overlooked. So it's not as easy as those are just words, but that is what it's about.
Maybe inviting counselors to more meetings. I don't know, like I'm sure you could convince me to go.
Okay.
I was guilty too. I often tell the story, until my mother was in Lee Manor, and I was there every single day for a year. It was an eye opener for me and a wake up call to see what actually goes on in there. And so that's all part of the process.
Yes.
Deputy Warden McQueen, did you have something there?
Yeah, well, thank you. Good topic, good conversation. I know that in Grey Highlands here, one of our museum staff is recording. There's so many stories, there's so many things that to be told, and we're starting to record some of those historical stories that are there, and there's so much. And I was just thinking that maybe we just need to all go out when we get through this COVID and just have a game of euchre, and be whipped. Because it's just spending time, like you said. It's part of, and because they have so much wealth of information. It's just in that sense, and maybe that's there's just to tap into that and listen and hear the stories. I find it so fascinating when we used to have a lot of our smaller community social dinners and stuff like that. Well, they don't have those anymore because a lot of the people putting them on have all passed on. And the new generations don't have that same networking, the same connection, in the same way. And a lot of our smaller community things have sort of gone by the wayside. But yeah, there's something to be said there for sure. Thank you.
Can I just say one little thing that I think one of the biggest things I'm hearing is the change in our culture based on respect. They used to respect their doctors' opinions. They used to respect the politicians. And these people that are in the age group that I'm in and older than me, they still want to respect them, but somehow it's all been pushed away. And I do think social media, as much good it's done a lot of this hard, because everybody's opinions are out there and it's just too much for everybody. So that respecting thing, and that will only come by us making sure that we decide we want to have respect for each other. So that's what a relationship's about anyway, with a marriage, everything, respect's in there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, Jan. Councillor Desai, you have a question?
Oh, it's more of a statement. Deputy Warden McQueen mentioned euchre, but I've been told bridge is where it's at. And I've really been brushing up on my bridge skills. I know how to keep score now. I win the odd time, and I see Councillor Milne has unmuted. Chair, I ask that you call him out of order before he says anything.
I was just going to offer that the game of lost air is, and maybe nobody's aware of that, but Lost Air is a game that my aunts and uncles and grandparents used to play quite a bit. And I have played it, but I'm certainly not an expert. But you know, the generations have different things that they identify with, and that would be one that my seniors would definitely generate or connect with.
Cribbage is in there.
Cribbage is in there too. Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
With that, Jan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope that was as
Well, I
good
hope
for
it
you
was-
as it was for us.
I hope it was helpful. All right. And I know
Thank you, Jan.
there'll be some things happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Do we have any other business? Seeing none. Our next meeting is January 11th. We're not having one next week, or no? January 11th is our next meeting. Do we have a mover for adjournment? Moved by, Warden Hicks, go ahead.
I'm sorry. What is the, Mr. Chairman, what is the focus of the January 11th meeting?
I can answer that. That's policing perspective. So I've invited Chief Ambrose and Chief Knoll to that meeting.
Card games. Card games.
That will be a good, Noel, that will be a really good one. I look forward
Yes,
to that.
that will be.
Could we have a mover and a seconder for adjournment, please? Councillor Milne and Deputy Warden McQueen. Thank you. So I guess we don't see each other before Christmas. I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Stay safe, follow the rules, and we'll see you soon. Meeting adjourned.
Very good.
See you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Everyone.